Tubas are really unique in just how many variations you can commonly find. Practically every model from every brand can be different, from the shape of the tubing, the types of valve it has, the size, the key, and so much more. So I'm going to be explaining almost every type of tuba and what makes it different. Now, I will be excluding baritones and euphoniums from this. I know there's an argument that technically they're tubas and whatever, but I think they're different enough. And I'm also excluding historical instruments like the ophicleide and all the random variations of the sax horn with their Berliner pump and valves and strange shapes. I would be here forever if I talked about those. I'm not a qualified instrument historian, but there are a lot out there and I highly suggest you look for them, because instrument history is fascinating. But without further ado, let's get to the variations. First, let's start with the different keys. You've got 4 main keys with tubas: F, E flat, C, and B flat. Now in those keys you have 2 different types of tubas: bass tubas and contrabass tubas. Contrabass tubas are separated by having a double letter in front of them, so double B flat and double C, that means contrabass. F and E flat tubas are the main bass tubas, and double C and double B flat are the main contrabass tubas, but you also have double F and double E flat contrabass tubas. Those fingerings are the same as their bass counterparts, just an octave down. Generally, all tubas read in bass clef and read in concert pitch, unless you're in a brass band that chooses to read in treble clef and some key like B flat. So instead of the way the saxophone family does it, where they transpose the music but each fingering makes the same pitch, a tuba has different fingerings to get the same pitch. This is an E flat tuba, so if I don't press any buttons down and blow through it, I'll probably get an E flat. But with this double B flat tuba, if I blow through it, I'll get a B flat, and to hit the same E flat that tuba did, I have to press a valve down. While it can be a little difficult getting used to different sets of fingerings for different keys of tuba, it's really nice to just be able to play concert pitch all the time. Now there's a huge size variation in different types of tubas. There are 4 main sizes of tubas: 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, and 6/4, as well as travel tubas, which aren't very common and they're really compact and meant for travel. Interestingly enough, there's no standard for how big a 4/4 or a 3/4 tuba should be. It's just however big the company wants it to be. This Lisette tuba is 4/4 and it's decently sized. But this King 4/4 tuba is clearly a lot bigger and a lot heavier. And yes, this is a double B flat and the other one's an E flat, so this has more tubing, but it's more about the diameter of the tubing itself. That's what sets apart 3/4 from 4/4 from 5/4 from 6/4, is how big itself the tubing is. Specifically after all the valves are done. That's when it starts to get a lot bigger. The bell size can also change a lot. This is a bad example because it's a recording bell, which I'll talk about later, but this is 24 inches, really wide. But this bell is only 16 inches. It's also a lot taller and skinnier than some of the bigger tubas. Now, not talking about the travel tubas, which are meant to be extremely compact, the 3/4 tubas are generally the smallest tubas you'll really see. To an untrained eye, a 3/4 tuba can look like a euphonium, but if you know what you're looking at, it really doesn't look like a euphonium at all. Now, a 3/4 B-flat tuba, even though it takes up less space, can play all the same notes that a bigger tuba of the same key can. The benefits of a 3/4 tuba being smaller are that kids can learn, ones who can't reach as high or can't carry as big a tuba, or brass bands that don't want to carry around massive tubas. It does make a different sound though. When the tubing is smaller, it doesn't have as wide as a 6/4 tuba's sound, which is really massive. The sound difference between the sizes of tubas is really the biggest thing you have to think about when you're choosing the size of tuba. It's not bigger is always better and everyone should have a 6/4 tuba. It's what do you need this for? The sound of a 5/4 and 6/4 tuba is incredibly beefy and it's typically best for things like orchestral purposes. If you're playing outside or walking around, you don't need that incredibly beefy concert hall sound, so a 3/4 tuba can be really nice. Now, where the tuning slides and tubes are placed is really dependent on the brand, the type of tuba you have, and where the valves are placed. They can be put in any way you want. The way the tubing is placed makes it really easy to identify what brand, style, and model of tuba you have. You can look at this interesting lead pipe or the way the main tuning slide is and realize, hey, I know that style. I love looking out for King 2341s just like this, and they're really easy to identify because of the 3 tuning slide loops right here. Things like that make it easy to differentiate from things like the 2341W. Almost every brand and model finds a different way to wrap the tubing, and it makes it really interesting to look at different tubas. It also means that every different tuba has slightly different tolerances, and some notes just come out better, even on the same key of tuba. Now where the valves are placed can be wildly different on different tubas. Both of my tubas have front-facing valves, where you put your hand like this, but even the finger spread is different from this. But another really common way to have your valves is to have them up top. They're called top action valves, as opposed to front action valves. There are even some tubas out there that have 3 top action valves and 1 side action valve, the same way you'd see on some euphoniums. Now you'll notice there are 2 types of valves. These are called rotary valves, like what you'd see on a French horn or a trombone trigger, while this tuba has piston valves and go up and down. Both valve types are good but different in their own ways. There's no better or worse valve type, it's just whatever you prefer. Now the minimum amount of valves you'll have is 3, but there are also 4, 5, and 6 valve tubas. You can find 3, 4, and 5 valve tubas in basically every key, but 6 valve tubas are typically only on F tubas. You might be thinking, what do you need more than 3 valves for? The way a valve works is when you press one down while you're playing through it, it'll extend the tubing by, say, a half step, a whole step, a third, and so on. Basically, each valve extends the tubing by a certain amount. Now, the 4th valve is equal to 1 and 3 combined, but it also plays slightly more in tune. But the other benefit of adding a 4th valve means you can play lower than you could with 3. The lowest you can go on a B-flat tuba is E1. It's 1, 2, and 3 all pressed down. But if you have a 4th valve, you can keep going down because it's extending the tubing more, and you can go all the way down to B-flat 0. Now, adding a 5th valve isn't really important in extending your range even more because there's no musical reason to have a tuba play past B-flat 0. But what it does do is give you more possible combinations for alternate fingerings because each tuba has different tolerances and different notes that are slightly in tune and out of tune. So if you have a 5th valve, you might be able to get a more in-tune note than if you didn't. Same idea with a 6th valve. Now, something I don't have an example of on my tubas are triggers. Some triggers are just valves in different places, but some of them are slide kickers. They're basically levers that can pull up a tuning slide, and then when you let go, it'll go back down. The use of that is that on some tubas in certain ranges, some of the notes, even if it's the same fingering, it can be out of tune, and it's a lot harder to change your mouth than it is to pull out the tuning slide. So that just pushes the tuning slide a certain amount for you. Something like that is really just for professionals in certain instances where you need to be absolutely perfect. You're not a bad player and you don't have a bad tuba if it doesn't have slide kickers. I have seen some people think their tuba is bad because it's only 4/4, or it only has 4 valves and no triggers. That doesn't mean anything. You can play perfectly with just a tuba like this. Now you'll notice I have 2 types of bell positions. This is a normal tuba, a standard tuba, with an upright bell. It's called an upright tuba. I'd say 99% of tubas are like this, with the bell that's just part of the body. Now this is called a recording bell tuba, and it uses the front-facing bell to project the sound forward. It was really nice in the early 1900s so that you could project straight into the microphone. Now you'll notice it's not a perfect 90 degrees forward, it is still up a little bit. And as you can see, you can just unscrew it if you want and replace it with a straight upright bell. It's also important that it unscrews because it comes in 2 different cases, one for the body and one for the bell. The downside to that is that the cases are really heavy and they're both awkward shapes, so they're a pain to carry. A detachable bell isn't unique to tubas though. Of course, there are a lot of euphoniums and baritones that have it, as well as screw-on bells on French horns and trombones. Okay, now it's time to get into the types of marching tubas. The one you're probably the most familiar with is the sousaphone, or that one from VeggieTales. Sousaphones, of course, are really distinctive with the massive front-facing bells and the round body that wraps around you. They typically only have 3 valves. Double B-flat is the standard for sousaphones, but there are double C, E-flat, and F sousaphones if you look hard enough. Sousaphones are also mainly piston valves. I don't think I've ever seen a rotary sousaphone before. Sousaphones have a really wide, strong sound, but they can also blast super easily, and they're great at projecting because of that front-facing horn. Interestingly, in 1893, when John Philip Sousa asked J.W. Pepper to make the sousaphone, they didn't have the front-facing bell at first. They were nicknamed rain catchers because they had upright bells on the sousaphone body. Now, helicons were the predecessor to sousaphones, coming around 40 years earlier, and they're what John Philip Sousa copied off of to make the sousaphone. Helicons were actually invented for horseback riding, not marching. They were made for army bands, so they could be the bass and contrabass horns while they rode on horses. I really wish I had my own helicon here. I own an 1880 E-flat helicon, but it's getting repaired. Because they're what sousaphones copied off of, they have a similar round design and similar valve placement, but there are also a lot of differences too. One kind of minor thing is that helicons tend to have a little bit smaller diameter than sousaphones, and the bell is very much smaller. Sousaphones have massive bells, but helicons don't tend to get that big. Now, unlike sousaphones, helicons are common in all 4 keys, but B-flat and E-flat are more common than C and F. It's also common to find helicons with rotary valves instead of piston valves, and it's really common to find 4-valve helicons instead of just 3. And of course, you'll notice the bell is pointed off to the side instead of up and around. That was the biggest thing that got changed with the sousaphone. Some people, especially people in America where sousaphones were invented, think that helicons are historic instruments that were replaced by the sousaphone, the same way the ophicleide was replaced by the tuba, but that's not the case at all. Helicons may not be the marching standard anymore, but you can still find them all over the world. This might be that I was never in marching band in high school, but I really prefer helicons over sousaphones. Now I gotta talk about contras, and I have to separate contras from marching tubas because I know someone's gonna get mad. Contras, short for contrabass bugles, are in the key of double G. That's a third lower than double B flat. They're technically not tubas because they were never part of the sax horn family, but for all intents and purposes, they're marching tubas. Now, marching tubas are double B flat tubas, and they've been changed to look more like contras in the key of double B flat. These are true tubas because they were part of the sax horn family, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they have overtaken double G tubas and become the new standard. Basically, everyone just calls them contras because it's easier, and I haven't found any other keys besides double G and double B flat for contras, so you'll have to let me know if there are any. And real quick, I have to give an honorary mention to the chimbasso. Yes, it's pronounced chimbasso, not kimbasso or simbasso, and it's technically not a tuba, but it is found in all the standard tuba keys and the fingerings directly translate. So that's the crazy amount of variations tuba can have. I'm sure I missed something, and if I did, you'll tell me in the comments. I can't think of any other brass instrument that varies just as much as different tubas do. It does help that this instrument is so big. There's so much you can change with the key, the valves, the tube placement, the size, everything. It really makes tuba one of the coolest brass instruments out there.